I stepped through the front door, the weight of a grueling workday still clinging to my shoulders. My house, a modest bungalow on the outskirts of town, felt like a sanctuary. The familiar scent of home greeted me as I kicked off my shoes. I was never one for suspense, so when I heard noises coming from my bedroom, my first instinct was to investigate. As I approached the room, I was certain I'd find an intruder. Maybe a thief or a wandering animal had made its way inside. Pushing the door open, my heart pounded with a mix of apprehension and adrenaline. What I saw, however, shattered my expectations. There, in my bed, lay my twin brother, Alex. We hadn't seen each other in months, not since our bitter falling out over a disputed inheritance from our late parents. Our relationship had been strained for years, but this was something else entirely. "What the hell are you doing here?" Alex jumped up, his eyes wide with surprise.
"Oh, Mark, it's you. I didn't expect you back so soon."
I couldn't believe it. He'd been living in my house without my knowledge, using my bed, my things, my space. "You didn't expect me back at all, did you? This is my home. Alex," he scratched his head, a sheepish grin tugging at his lips.
"Look, Mark, I know we've had our differences, but I needed a place to crash. I didn't think you'd mind."
"Mind? You stole my home, my privacy, my life."
"I get it, okay? I messed up. But I'll make it up to you. Let's talk this out."
"Fine, let's talk. But you're explaining everything." We spent hours in that room talking through our grievances. Alex admitted he'd fallen on hard times, lost his job, and had nowhere else to turn. He'd seen the for sale sign in front of my house and knew I wasn't living there. In his desperation, he'd broken in and made himself at home. As we talked, I couldn't help but notice the guilt and desperation in his eyes. He wasn't just my brother. He was a broken man who'd hit rock bottom. Despite my anger, a part of me couldn't turn my back on him entirely. Eventually, we agreed that Alex would stay temporarily while he got back on his feet. But he'd have to follow my rules, pay rent, and contribute to the household expenses. It was the least he could do. In the weeks that followed, Alex settled into my house as a less intrusive presence. I'd come home from work, and we'd exchange pleasantries before retreating to our separate spaces. It was far from ideal, but it seemed manageable. One evening, I returned home to find Alex pacing in the living room, his face etched with worry.
"Mark, we need to talk."
"What's wrong now?"
"It's not just me here. I have a guest. A friend who needed a place to stay for a while."
"Alex, you can't just invite people over without asking me first."
I know. But she had nowhere else to go, Mark. Her landlord kicked her out, and she's homeless."
The mention of a homeless woman living under my roof made me relent, but not without hesitation. "Okay, fine, but she's temporary, and she has to follow the rules too." Alex nodded gratefully, and we both went to meet his friend Lisa. She was a woman in her 30s, her eyes heavy with the weight of a difficult life. We exchanged pleasantries, and she assured me she'd do her part to contribute to the household. Days turned into weeks, and our odd arrangement continued. I couldn't help but notice that Lisa and Alex were becoming closer, spending more time together. It wasn't long before they started dating, which only added to the complications of the living situation. One evening, as I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, I overheard their hushed conversation in the living room. They thought I couldn't hear them, but their words drifted to me through the open doorway.
"Lisa, we can't keep living like this."
"I know, Alex, but where else can we go?"
Their words filled me with a sense of unease. It was one thing to offer my brother a temporary haven, but this was spiraling into something else entirely. I needed to confront them. I stormed into the living room, my temper flaring. "What the hell is going on here?"
"Mark, Lisa's pregnant. We didn't know how to tell you."
"Pregnant? Are you serious?"
"Yes, Mark. We didn't plan for this, but it's happening."
The room was filled with tension as I tried to process this bombshell. My anger melted into a bewildered sense of responsibility. I couldn't just kick out my brother and a pregnant woman, even if they'd put me in an impossible situation. In the months that followed, our makeshift family expanded. Lisa's pregnancy progressed, and I found myself taking on the role of an unexpected guardian. My initial anger had given way to reluctant acceptance, and I couldn't bring myself to abandon them. As Lisa's due date approached, the tension in the house mounted. The three of us were trapped in a suffocating bubble of shared space and shared responsibilities. I felt like a stranger in my own home. One evening, as Lisa's contractions began, we rushed her to the hospital. The labor was long and grueling, and I stayed by her side, despite the discomfort of being so close to the brother I'd grown to resent. Finally, after hours of agony, Lisa gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The moment I held that tiny, fragile life in my arms, something shifted inside me. I realized that this child was innocent, and I couldn't let her grow up in the chaos that had enveloped our lives. As we settled into a new routine as an unconventional family, I found myself forging an unexpected bond with Lisa and the baby. It wasn't what I'd planned for my life, but it was what I'd been handed, and I was determined to make the best of it. However, as the months passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Alex and Lisa were taking advantage of my generosity. They seemed content to let me shoulder the financial burden and responsibilities while they focused on their own desires. It was clear that I needed to confront them once again. One evening, when the baby was finally asleep, I sat them down for serious conversation. "We need to talk about the future." Alex exchanged a nervous glance with Lisa.
What's on your mind, Mark?
"I've been thinking that it's time for us to make some changes. I can't keep carrying the weight of this family on my own. We all need to contribute equally." Lisa nodded in agreement, her expression somber.
You're right, Mark. We should all do our part.
But as days turned into weeks, I saw no change in their behavior. It became clear that they had no intention of living up to their promises. They continued to take advantage of my kindness, and I couldn't stand it any longer. One evening, after another frustrating argument about their lack of responsibility, I reached my breaking point. I couldn't allow them to continue using me like this. I needed to take matters into my own hands and finally get my revenge. As I sat in my room, plotting my next move, a plan began to take shape. I would expose their true intentions to the world, ensuring they faced the consequences of their actions. It was time for me to reclaim my life and put an end to the charade that had taken over my home. But little did I know that my quest for revenge would lead to even darker and more unexpected twists in the tale of my twin brother, Alex, and the woman he'd brought into my life. I spent the next few days carefully crafting my plan. My goal was to reveal the truth about Alex and Lisa to the world without causing undue harm. I didn't want to destroy their lives, but I needed them to understand the consequences of their actions. First, I decided to gather evidence of their negligence and irresponsibility. I documented their refusal to contribute financially or help with household chores. I secretly recorded conversations that revealed their indifference toward their responsibilities as parents. Next, I reached out to a lawyer to understand my legal options. I wanted to ensure that I could protect the baby's best interests while holding Alex and Lisa accountable for their actions. The lawyer advised me to document everything meticulously and to consider seeking sole custody of the child if their behavior continued. With a plan in motion, I confronted Alex and Lisa one evening. "We need to have a serious talk.
What's going on, Mark?
I've given you both ample time to step up and take responsibility for your actions, but you've done nothing. It's clear that you're taking advantage of me, and I won't allow it to continue." Lisa's eyes welled up with tears.
Mark, we're trying our best. We're just in a tough spot right now.
"I've documented everything. Your promises to contribute, your failure to do so, your conversations about avoiding responsibility. I've consulted with a lawyer, and I'm prepared to take legal action if necessary."
You can't do this to us, Mark.
"I'm not doing this to you. You did this to yourselves. It's time to face the consequences of your actions." Over the next few weeks, I continued to build my case. I consulted with social workers and child services to ensure the baby's welfare. They conducted visits to our home, documenting the living conditions and the parenting provided by Alex and Lisa. It became clear that the baby was not thriving in their care. During this time, tensions in the house escalated. Alex and Lisa grew increasingly resentful, and their arguments became more frequent and volatile. I knew that my actions were driving a wedge between us, but I couldn't allow them to continue exploiting my generosity. Finally, the legal process was set in motion. I filed for temporary custody of the baby, citing concerns for her safety and well-being. Alex and Lisa were served with court documents, and they realized that their actions had serious consequences. As the court date approached, the strain on our makeshift family reached its breaking point. Alex and Lisa's anger and desperation grew, and they accused me of tearing their family apart. I felt a twinge of guilt, but I knew that my actions were necessary to protect the baby. The day of the court hearing arrived, and we all gathered in the courtroom. The tension in the air was palpable as we awaited the judge's decision. The proceedings were emotionally charged, with accusations and counter-accusations flying between our lawyers. I presented my evidence of their negligence and inability to provide a stable environment for the baby. During the hearing, the judge listened carefully to both sides. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on everyone in the room. As the arguments continued, I couldn't help but wonder if I had gone too far in my quest for revenge. Then, an unexpected twist occurred. Lisa, tears streaming down her face, broke down on the witness stand. She confessed that she'd been struggling with addiction for years, and that it had worsened after the birth of the baby. She admitted that she'd neglected her responsibilities as a mother, and that the baby would be better off with me. I was stunned by her admission. It was a shocking revelation that I hadn't anticipated. While I had suspected that they were unfit parents, I hadn't known the full extent of Lisa's struggles. The judge, sympathetic to the situation, granted me temporary custody of the baby. It was a bittersweet victory, as I knew that Lisa needed help and support to overcome her addiction. The judge also ordered mandatory rehab for her and required regular visits to assess her progress. As I left the courtroom with the baby in my arms, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness and regret. My quest for revenge had unintended consequences, and I had torn apart what remained of my relationship with my twin brother Alex. In the months that followed, I focused on providing a stable and loving environment for the baby. She thrived under my care, and I felt a profound sense of responsibility and love for her. I visited Lisa in rehab, offering support and encouragement as she worked to overcome her addiction. As for Alex, our relationship remained strained. He blamed me for the loss of custody and the separation from Lisa and the baby. It was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that my actions had irreparably damaged our bond.